athlete shot off the luge track at the Vancouver Olympics and slammed into a steel post.
The Olympic Games represent the pinnacle of human achievement, where athletes push their bodies to the absolute limit in pursuit of glory. But beneath the medals and anthems lies a sobering reality. The same determination that drives these competitors to greatness can sometimes lead them into tragedy. Accidents, medical disasters, and freak incidents have claimed lives throughout Olympic history, forever changing how we think about athletic safety.
And the official explanation for the death was that Nodar Komaratashvili was traveling at about 144 kilometers per hour.
These are the stories that remind us just how fragile the line between triumph and catastrophe can be. So what really happened in these darkest moments of Olympic history? 1. Nodar Komaratashvili's fatal training run. On February 12, 2010, just hours before the opening ceremony in Vancouver, a young Georgian luger named Nodar Komaratashvili took his final practice run down the Whistler Sliding Center. He was 21 years old and competing in his first Olympics. The track was the fastest in the world, designed to push sleds to unprecedented speeds. As Komaratashvili entered the final turn, his sled clipped the wall. He lost control instantly. The sled shot off the track at nearly 90 miles per hour, launching him into the air like a rag doll. He struck an unpadded steel support beam with devastating force. Medical personnel rushed to his side, but the injuries were catastrophic. He was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. The entire Olympic community was shaken. Organizers immediately raised the walls of the track, moved the starting positions lower to reduce speeds, and added padding to all exposed steel structures. His death sparked a fundamental rethinking of luge track design worldwide. The Georgian team nearly withdrew, but ultimately decided to compete in his honor, wearing black armbands throughout the Games. 2. The 1964 Innsbruck double tragedy. The 1964 Winter Olympics in Austria became one of the deadliest games in history, claiming 2 young lives within days of each other. First came Kazimierz Kai Skrzypecki, a British-Polish luger competing for Great Britain. During a training run on the Innsbruck luge track, he crashed violently. The track had minimal safety features by modern standards, with trees and rocks positioned dangerously close to the course. Kai Skrzypecki sustained severe head injuries and died 3 days later. He was just 23 years old. The tragedy cast a shadow over the Games, but worse was yet to come. Days later, 19-year-old Australian skier Ross Milne was practicing on the downhill course at Axemer Lism. The course was notoriously dangerous, with skiers reaching speeds over 80 miles per hour on steep, icy slopes lined with trees. Milne lost an edge, flew off the course, and slammed into a tree. He died instantly from the impact. The double tragedy forced Olympic organizers to finally acknowledge what many athletes already knew. Winter sports had become faster and more dangerous than safety protocols could handle. These deaths became a turning point, leading to mandatory safety nets, padding around obstacles, and stricter course inspections. 3. Nicolas Bochete and the snow machine. Speed skiing in 1992 was a demonstration sport, meaning it wasn't part of the official Olympic program, but was showcased to generate interest. The sport was exactly what it sounds like. Athletes wearing aerodynamic suits and specialized skis racing straight down a mountain to achieve the highest possible speed. Skiers regularly exceeded 120 miles per hour. On January 22, 1992, Swiss speed skier Nicolas Bochete was warming up on the slopes of Les Arcs near Albertville. He was 27 years old and considered one of the best in his sport. As he descended, a snow grooming machine was traversing across the slope below him. These machines are massive, slow-moving vehicles used to maintain ski runs. Bochete either didn't see it or misjudged his trajectory. He collided with the machine at high speed, suffering fatal injuries on impact. The tragedy highlighted a major coordination failure. Active training runs and maintenance vehicles should never occupy the same space simultaneously. Speed skiing was never included as an official Olympic sport after this incident, partly due to safety concerns that proved impossible to fully address. 4. Jörg Oberhammer's freak accident. Not all Olympic tragedies involve competing athletes. On February 24, 1988, during the Calgary Winter Olympics, Dr. Jörg Oberhammer was skiing recreationally near the Olympic venues. He was the chief medical officer for the Austrian Olympic team, a respected physician who had dedicated his career to keeping athletes safe. While skiing down a public slope, he collided with another recreational skier. The impact knocked him off balance and sent him tumbling directly into the path of a snow-clearing machine that was grooming a nearby section of the mountain. The machine operator had no time to react. Oberhammer was struck and killed instantly in front of horrified spectators. The accident was ruled entirely accidental, but it demonstrated how dangerous the equipment used to maintain winter sports venues could be. The tragedy was particularly cruel because Oberhammer spent his life protecting others from harm, only to fall victim to an unlucky moment in the wrong place. 5. Francisco Lazaro's wax coating disaster. The 1912 Stockholm Olympics took place during a scorching summer, with temperatures reaching uncomfortable levels for distance runners. Francisco Lazaro was a 21-year-old Portuguese marathoner competing in his first Olympics. Like many athletes of that era, he had limited understanding of sports science and heat management. Concerned about sunburn during the long race, Lazaro covered his entire body in a thick coating of wax or animal suet mixed with oil. He believed this would protect his skin from the sun's rays. What he didn't realize was that this coating effectively sealed his pores, preventing his body from sweating and regulating its core temperature. As the marathon progressed, his body temperature climbed dangerously high. Around the 30-kilometer mark, Lazaro collapsed on the course. He was rushed to a hospital but never regained consciousness. He died the following day from what doctors determined was severe heat stroke combined with possible heart complications. His death was one of the first documented cases of an athlete dying from heat-related illness during competition, and it led to increased medical supervision at endurance events. 6. Knud Enemark Jensen and the birth of drug testing. August 26, 1960, was brutally hot in Rome. The temperature soared past 100 degrees Fahrenheit as cyclists lined up for the 100-kilometer team time trial. Among them was Knud Enemark Jensen, a 23-year-old Danish cyclist competing in his first Olympics. About halfway through the race, Jensen began weaving erratically on his bike. His teammates noticed something was wrong, but before they could react, he collapsed and fractured his skull on the pavement. He was rushed to a hospital but died shortly after. An autopsy revealed traces of amphetamines and a blood circulation stimulant called Ronicol in his system. While his team denied administering drugs, the evidence suggested otherwise. Jensen's death shocked the sporting world and became the catalyst for implementing mandatory drug testing at the Olympics. Before 1960, performance-enhancing substances were largely unregulated and openly used by some athletes. Jensen's tragedy forced the International Olympic Committee to confront the deadly consequences of doping and establish the testing protocols that continue today. 7. The 1904 typhoid outbreak. The 1904 St. Louis Olympics were a disaster in almost every respect. The games were tacked onto the World's Fair, stretched over several months, and poorly organized. Among the many problems was the venue for aquatic events, an artificial lake created specifically for the fair. This lake was not properly filtered or maintained, and it sat adjacent to livestock exhibits that contaminated the water supply. Athletes swam and competed in water polo in conditions that would horrify modern health inspectors. Shortly after the games concluded, several competitors fell seriously ill with typhoid fever, a bacterial infection spread through contaminated water. 2 athletes, David Bratton and George Van Cleef, died from the disease. While their deaths occurred after the Olympics officially ended, they were directly linked to the unsanitary conditions during competition. The tragedy exposed the shocking lack of health and safety standards at early Olympic Games and led to stricter venue requirements for future events. 8. Nikolai Berichet's boxing death. Boxing has always been one of the most dangerous Olympic sports, and the 1936 Berlin Games witnessed a particularly tragic case. Nikolai Berichet was a Romanian featherweight boxer who competed against a German opponent during the tournament. The match was intense, with both fighters exchanging heavy blows. Berichet lost the bout, but appeared to be in reasonable condition immediately afterward. However, within days he fell gravely ill. He died shortly after, with official reports attributing his death to blood poisoning. Many observers at the time believed his death was actually caused by internal injuries sustained during the fight, possibly a ruptured organ or severe internal bleeding that went undetected. Medical understanding of traumatic brain injury and internal damage was primitive in 1936, and fighters often competed through injuries that would sideline modern athletes immediately. Barrichet's death was one of several boxing fatalities in Olympic history that eventually led to improved medical monitoring and stricter referee intervention protocols. 9. Eliška Misakova and the polio tragedy. In July 1948, the Czechoslovakian women's gymnastics team arrived in London full of hope for the upcoming Olympics. Among them was 28-year-old Eliška Misakova, an accomplished gymnast competing in her first games. Shortly after arriving in England, Misakova began feeling unwell. Her symptoms worsened rapidly, and doctors diagnosed her with polio, a devastating viral disease that attacks the nervous system and was epidemic in the 1940s before vaccines became available. Despite receiving the best available medical care, her condition deteriorated quickly. On the very day her teammates won the gold medal in the team competition, Misakova died in a London hospital. Her teammates were devastated but chose to compete in her memory. When they stood on the podium to receive their gold medals, each wore a black ribbon as tribute. The image of those grieving champions honoring their fallen teammate became one of the most poignant moments in Olympic history, reminding everyone that some battles cannot be won through athletic prowess alone. 10. The Passerelle des Invalides collapse. The 1900 Paris Olympics were chaotic and poorly organized, spread across 5 months and intertwined with the World's Fair. Infrastructure built for the fair was hastily adapted for Olympic events, often without proper safety inspections. One such structure was the Passerelle des Invalides, a temporary footbridge constructed to allow fairgoers to cross the Seine River. On a busy day during the Games, the bridge was packed with spectators heading to various events. Without warning, a section of the bridge collapsed, plunging dozens of people into the river below. Several drowned or were crushed by falling debris. Among the dead was Edmond Bressart, a French fencer who had been watching events near the bridge. The exact death toll remains unclear due to poor record-keeping at the 1900 Games, but estimates suggest at least 8 people died. The disaster highlighted the dangers of inadequate infrastructure and remains one of the worst structural failures in Olympic history. 11. The 2004 Athens bus crash. Tragedy struck the Athens Paralympics on September 18, 2004, though it claimed lives outside the competition itself. A bus carrying 7 Greek teenagers to watch Paralympic events collided head-on with a truck on a highway outside Athens. All 7 students were killed instantly, along with the truck driver. The victims were young fans excited to witness world-class athletes with disabilities compete at the highest level. The news devastated Greece and the entire Olympic community. The impact was so profound that organizers canceled the cultural portion of the Paralympic closing ceremony out of respect for the victims. The crash served as a grim reminder that Olympic tragedies extend beyond athletes and officials, to include the spectators and supporters who make the Games possible. It also highlighted concerns about transportation safety during major sporting events, where thousands of people are moving between venues on tight schedules. 12. Hyginus Onugo's street accident. The Sydney Olympics in 2000 were considered among the best organized in history, but tragedy still found a way to intrude. On September 8th, just days before the opening ceremony, Nigerian athlete Hyginus Onugo was struck by a car while crossing a street in Sydney. Onugo was a relay runner who had traveled to Australia full of dreams about competing on the world stage. The accident occurred at night, and details remain somewhat unclear, but witnesses reported that the 30-year-old athlete was hit by a vehicle that may not have seen him in time. He suffered catastrophic injuries and died shortly after reaching the hospital. The tragedy cast a pall over the Nigerian team and served as a sobering reminder that athletes face risks even in mundane activities far from their sports. His death highlighted the importance of athlete safety protocols extending beyond training and competition to include everyday movement in unfamiliar cities. 13. The 1928 ice thaw disaster. Sometimes an Olympic tragedy doesn't involve death, but rather the crushing of dreams that athletes spent years building. The 1928 Winter Olympics in St. Moritz, Switzerland, faced unseasonably warm weather that threatened several events. On February 14th, the 10,000-meter speed skating race began under overcast skies. Skaters launched into the grueling race, circling the outdoor ice track lap after lap. American skater Irving Jaffe was in the lead, on pace to win gold, when officials noticed a serious problem. The ice was melting rapidly under rising temperatures. Water pooled on the surface, creating dangerously uneven conditions. Some skaters had already completed the race, while others were still competing. After frantic consultation, officials made the devastating decision to cancel the race entirely and award no medals. Jaffe, who would have won gold, was left with nothing. For athletes who trained their entire lives for one moment, this administrative decision was heartbreaking. Jaffe would get redemption in 1932, winning 2 golds, but the 1928 disappointment showed how weather and logistics could destroy Olympic dreams as completely as any accident. 14. The 1920 horse transport tragedy. The 1920 Antwerp Olympics took place in the immediate aftermath of World War I, with Europe still recovering from years of devastation. Resources were scarce, and infrastructure was damaged. When horses arrived for the equestrian events, they had endured brutal transport conditions across war-torn regions. Ships and trains used to transport the animals were poorly maintained, with inadequate ventilation, food, and water. Upon arrival in Antwerp, many horses were already sick or injured. The stabling facilities were makeshift and insufficient. Several horses died shortly after arriving, while others had to be euthanized due to injuries or illnesses sustained during transport. The tragedy brought attention to animal welfare in Olympic sports, leading to stricter regulations about how horses and other animals must be treated during international competition. Modern Olympic equestrian events include veterinary inspections, mandatory rest periods, and detailed transport requirements that can be traced directly back to the suffering witnessed in Antwerp. 15. Safety evolution in Olympic history. Every tragedy at the Olympics has sparked change. After Nodar Komaratashvili died in 2010, luge tracks worldwide were redesigned with higher walls and protective padding. Francisco Lazaro's 1912 death led to medical stations positioned throughout marathon courses. Knud Jensen's fatal collapse in 1960 created the entire framework of Olympic drug testing. These weren't abstract policy changes, they were direct responses to preventable deaths. Modern Olympics feature extensive safety protocols that athletes from earlier eras could hardly imagine: mandatory helmet requirements, course inspections by independent safety experts, real-time medical monitoring, and immediate access to trauma care. Winter sport venues now include sophisticated crash padding, safety nets, and carefully designed runoff areas. Athletes undergo mandatory health screenings before competition, yet despite all these improvements, risk can never be eliminated entirely. The very nature of Olympic competition pushing human beings to their absolute physical limits means danger will always lurk at the edges. What has changed is the commitment to learning from every tragedy, to ensuring that no athlete's death is meaningless, and to creating systems that protect the next generation of competitors. These tragedies remind us that Olympic glory comes with real risks, and behind every safety rule is a story of loss that changed the games forever.